Hi, my name is Megan Walsh, and I'm the Behavioral Health Manager at Encompass. And this is a recording of a workshop that Jennifer Earnman and I led at Encompass in person on August 24th, 2021. We were asked to share a recording with families that didn't necessarily feel comfortable coming in person right now, and so we wanted to honor that request. So this training is on restraint collapse. And really, restraint collapse is about when kids have worked so hard to keep everything together, to do everything right, to stay emotionally regulated. And then they get to their safe place, which is usually their caregiver or somebody that they're used to being around. And they really just kind of lose it emotionally, sometimes physically as well. It can also happen when no matter how hard that child tried, things did not go well. No matter what they did, a peer was upset with them, or a teacher didn't see when they were trying, or, um, you know, for some kids, it just seems to happen like that, that they try and they try and they try, and people don't necessarily notice when they're trying because often the behavior can mask that. So we really want to be aware that restraint collapse is a real normal thing that happens to every human at some point. And it happens when environments change because there's so much that we are processing that we don't even notice. So we want to think about when kids go into a new environment like school, expectations from adults change, their peer relationships are changed, there's new rules, there's environmental factors like maybe there's a buzzing from the lights, or maybe the lights are too bright, or the carpet makes a weird sound, or somebody's shoes flop. All of these things are things that that child has no control over. Schedules are also really different. Often, maybe they've been staying up a little later at night and getting up a little bit later in the morning. And so schedules are changing, sleep patterns are changing. It's not kind of a restful morning. It's a get up and go kind of morning. So what we want to think about is all of those pressures and changes on kids and on ourselves as adults, because I know I have experienced restraint collapse many a time. So we want to think about what happens is that when they reach their safe space. So it's helpful for me to hold on to that. I'm getting the brunt of this from my child because they feel like I'm a safe person. So while we don't want our kids, abusing us or anything like that, it's okay to recognize that it's okay for them to kind of let down their guard with us because we're their safe space. So what happens is they get to you, they kind of collapse emotionally and sometimes physically. That might mean that they can't control their emotions. Maybe they're crying or screaming or silent. Maybe they kind of look like a zombie. It might mean that they flop into the back seat of the car. It might mean that they flop onto the floor and, throw their backpack on the ground. So we need to be aware that there's a lot of ways that this can present. And sometimes it's actually called defensive attachment. And I read an article that likened it to when you're in a really busy store and you lose your child. We've all experienced that at some point, right? Where maybe our child is hiding in a clothing rack or they just get lost in the crowd. And that fear and that anxiety and that panic that well up for us. And then we find them. And usually we might give them a quick hug, but we're also going to give them a quick talking to, right? We're not going to be super happy with the fact that they got lost. So all of our emotions from that panic and that fear and that anxiety is going to come out in being kind of frustrated with them. And so that's that defensive attachment. Like I'm so worried about you that I'm going to kind of unleash on you a little bit. And so maybe that child has been worried about your connection all day. Maybe they've missed you all day and then they just finally get to you and they lose it. It's important to also note this doesn't just happen after school. I know this is called after school restraint collapse a lot of the time, but it can also happen in co-parenting and custody situations or when a child goes to camp for an extended period of time and come back. So it's about that changing environment and getting back to your safe place. So what are some signs? What can we notice? So Every child is unique. I always want to give that caveat because it's not going to look the same in every child or every adult. It can look like your child's kind of whiny or weepy, maybe disrespectful and rude, throwing things sometimes. Maybe they can seem aggressive. Sometimes they've got some great little zingers, some insults going on. They could also be silent, or they could just have tons and tons of energy. I have a friend whose child sometimes will kind of like poke at her or punch her in the arm gently, like just kind of really seeming to like push buttons a little bit. So those are the usual signs. So what do we recommend? First, we want to look at, there's a couple of steps that we're going to take in this workshop. We're going to look at regulating, relating, and then teaching. And that comes from the work of Dr. Bruce Perry. And so Dr. Perry says that we always want to regulate first. And I find that to be really wise. And it's not just about regulating our kids, it's about regulating ourselves. Because if we approach our child who's dysregulated in a dysregulated state ourselves, we're just going to bring everybody higher. But if we can regulate ourselves and approach our dysregulated child, then things will start to settle down. So I always like to encourage snacks and hydration. We've all heard about hangry, and you've probably seen that Snickers commercial. So we want to think about, with a snack, how can I get my child to eat a snack really quickly and have it be something that can kind of satiate them a little bit? And then hydration. We often don't feel dehydrated until we're about 10% dehydrated, but it starts to affect our behavior and our brain function when we're about 2 to 3% dehydrated. So anytime we can push the water, that is a really good thing. We also want to lower the expectations. Some people will call this dropping the rope, because at SeaWorld, they used to train the dolphins by kind of slowly raising a rope in the pool, and then the dolphins would jump over it. So if we lower the rope, then we're going to know, we're going to just accept the behaviors that we're seeing. We're going to know that this is a really, really hard time for my child, and I need to just kind of love on them for a little bit and give them what they need and not have these super high expectations. And then we're going to offer connection with a trusted person or animal. Sometimes when it's not necessarily helpful for a person to be there, an animal can really, really help. So if your kiddo is an animal person, see how you can offer them connection with that trusted animal. We also want to have some comfort items available. When my kids were smaller, I often would have a bag in the car that had water bottles and granola bars and nuts and maybe some fidgets and a stuffed animal or two and a weighted blanket. And I would just keep those items in my trunk because I always wanted to have them available. And I just really could never get it together to pack it every day. So if it's always in the trunk, it's always there. And then we want to add in as much consistency as possible. If you can develop a routine for what you do when you pick your child up, that can really help. Maybe things didn't go the way they wanted at school. Maybe there were a lot of unexpected things, but if they know that as soon as they get in the car with you, they get to listen to their favorite music, or they have a favorite stuffy that's in the car, or they get handed a snack, or you go to the park, or maybe you sing a song together, whatever it is that you can do on a ritualistic basis with your child, letting them know this is what we do every single time you get in the car. That is really, really helpful. You also might want to try incorporating some things that soothe their nervous system, like humming or drumming, or getting them to sing their favorite song. Water activities can be really helpful. When my kids were little, I used to joke, like, whenever they're grumpy, just add water, because that made everything better. And that might mean you let them splash in the hose or the sprinkler at home. Or if you can take them swimming, that's the best possible route. But maybe it's just a quick bath after school. So we want to think about how we can add in soothing activities to our kids. And then repetitive tasks where they're doing the same motion over and over again, like bike riding, or doing a puzzle, or going for a walk. Any of those repetitive tasks are also going to regulate their nervous system. Some of my favorite things to do to regulate also are helping them to drink out of a straw. And the smaller the straw, the harder they have to suck to get the liquid out of there. So that will give them some calming. Also, that hard, nasty gum, I can never remember the name of it, but we all know it. Adults usually don't like it, but kids love it. That can be helpful and give them that proprioceptive input that they need. Some crunchy snacks, carrots and pretzels are some of my favorites there. A weighted item. You can usually around the holidays get weighted stuffed animals in a lot of different places. You can always order them on Amazon or other places online. But weighted items can be really helpful, whether that's a lap pad or a stuffy. One of my favorite things to do is the deflated exercise ball. I don't know if any of you have had a child who kicks the back seat while you're trying to drive. And maybe it's that they're not even frustrated. They're just kind of bored kicking the back seat. And there's very little that's more frustrating to a parent than trying to drive safely and having somebody kick the back of your seat. So if you can find an exercise ball, a smaller exercise ball, and deflate it a little bit, and then just shove it in the space between the front seat and where your child's sitting, then they have something that they can kick. They can get that extra energy out, and it's not going to frustrate you. It's not going to make it dangerous to drive. So a deflated exercise ball can really be a great tool for parents to help in regulating. After we've regulated the parent, we're going to regulate the child, and then we're going to relate to their feeling. So we're going to listen to ourselves and kind of close off that ability that we have as parents often to argue with our kids. Maybe they have a feeling that doesn't make sense to us. Maybe we feel like they shouldn't feel the way that they do. But this is not the time to do that. We don't want you to argue with your child because that's going to escalate things. The feeling that they have is valid. We want to help them learn to express that in a way that's appropriate. And arguing with them about the validity of their feeling is not going to help that path. So we're not going to argue with them. We're going to think about a time when I felt as upset as my child did. So maybe they are super, super upset because they didn't get to play soccer on the field. And you know that they get to play soccer all the time, right? So you're feeling like, okay, that's really not something worth getting upset about. But for them, it was super important. So think about a time when maybe you felt left out. Think about a time when you really wanted to do something and you didn't get to. So connect with the feeling, not necessarily the circumstances. We're not going to try to fix it. We're just going to sit in that feeling with them. We're going to let them know however they're feeling is okay, that we understand, that we appreciate. We don't want to say, I know exactly how you're feeling, because nobody knows exactly how anyone else is feeling. But we could say something like, oh, you seem really upset. I felt upset like that before too. Oh, just really get them to know that you get it. It's okay. And it doesn't feel great. And you're in there with them. They're not alone with their big feelings. So we want to normalize and appreciate how hard it is to try really hard to get things right and then to lose control. So if your child is screaming and kicking and doing those things, you can say, oh, wow, you're so frustrated. I see that. It is so hard to try all day and then to not be able to control yourself. That is so hard. I'm going to be over here. Let me know when you're ready. And maybe we could go to the park in a bit. So give them the space to experience their feelings, because once they get into that space of losing it completely, you really can't bring it down. You've got to just ride the roller coaster, back off a little bit, give them the space, and then reconnect with them. So we're going to relate to the feeling after we've regulated ourselves, then regulated our child. We're going to relate to the feeling. So a couple of ways that we have found that you can minimize after school restraint collapse. We want to be intentional, like I just said, about regulating yourself prior to your interaction with the child. And that can look a lot of different ways. Maybe I know that I'm going to be in a meeting until right before I have to go get my kiddo. So then I'm going to think about, what can I do quickly to regulate myself? For me, maybe it's making sure that I have some water. or making sure that I listen to a favorite song or a favorite playlist on my drive over there. Or maybe it's that I call a friend and connect with them, or just that I focus on my breathing on the way over there, in through my nose, out through my mouth, making sure that I can regulate myself so that when my kiddo gets in the car, they're not going to escalate just to match where I am. So we're going to be regulated ourselves. Then we're going to greet our child in positive ways. Sometimes, especially like if you've gotten a call from the school during the day, or maybe you noticed they didn't pick up their room before they left, then you might be tempted to greet them with like, hi, you didn't do this, this, or this, or your teacher said you did this. And that's going to set things off on a negative tone for sure. So try to focus on greeting your child in positive ways. I'm so glad to see you, or I missed you today. Just let them know that you see them. It's not about behavior at this point. It's appreciating and noticing your child for the precious person they are, regardless of what they have done or not done. So you're going to greet them in positive ways. You're going to recognize that silence is okay. If they need to just sit there quietly, allow that and appreciate that. Don't ask them questions at this point. Sometimes kids, especially kids with some anxious tendencies, can get really riled up when we pepper them with questions because they feel like they have to have the right answer to every question. So it's really anxiety provoking for them. So we want to avoid asking questions at this point. And if you need to know something, you can actually kind of wonder. Like an example of that might be, maybe I'm wondering, maybe I want to know if they saw a friend that day. So I might say, I wonder what you did during lunch today. So you're making a statement. The difference is that the statement doesn't necessarily require an answer. So that decreases the child's anxiety. They might answer you, they might not, but wondering doesn't require an answer. You're also going to get to be a detective. This is one of my favorite parts because when I was a kid, I always wanted to be a detective. So we want to think about what helps my child. I want to watch. I want to wonder again. I want to think about what my child may not know what they need. They might not be able to ask for it. And so I want to think about and watch for things that are calming to them, because the things that are calming to me might or might not be helpful to them. So we want to give them a chance to just live their life, and we want to watch for what's calming and what's kind of escalating for them. And so watch for those calming things and just provide it to them. I would caution you to not, and sometimes you want to offer, it just depends on the kiddo and the circumstance. So again, be a detective and figure out what works for your kiddo. But sometimes it's really helpful if you know that your child needs water and you think that that's probably what's going on, you can just get them a glass of water or get them a bottle of water and put it down near them and walk away. That often will work much better than saying you need to drink some water, because they're going to kind of put up some boundaries and fight back against that. So some kids thrive with more control. So the more choices that you can offer them, the better. So every tiny little thing that you can offer them a choice on is going to kind of help take away those control battles over the bigger things. So if you're sitting down at the table, you might say, do you want the green placemat or the white placemat? Or do you want a spoon or a fork? Anything. And maybe that it's easier to eat noodles with a fork, but offer them a spoon and they can figure it out. If you have two straws that look exactly the same, ask them which straw they want. Any tiny little choices. Some of my favorites when my kids were little are, do you want to put this shoe on first or your other shoe on first? Do you want to step out of the car on the right side or the left side? I don't care which side of the car they get on. What's important to me is that they get out of the car. So offer those choices, and that can be really helpful. We also want to encourage you to increase your connect time when you're together. So increase that time that you're paying close attention to your child and your child is engaged with you and seeing how much you enjoy interacting with them. If you want some more tips on that, we have a great Connecting with Your Child tip sheet on the Encompass website. So please feel free to click on resources and you'll be able to find all of our wonderful tip sheets there. We also would encourage you to stay connected throughout the day. You can do things like put a little note in their lunchbox or draw a heart on their palm, and draw a heart on your palm and let them know that you can think about each other whenever you see that heart during the day. There's a great little book called The Kissing Hand about a mama raccoon and her baby and how they go about their day looking at the little hearts on their palms and know that they're thinking about each other. That's a great book to read to your kids and then do that the next day and help them to know that you're staying connected all throughout the day. Another thing that can work really well is prescribing the meltdown. So you might say something to them like, when I pick you up from school today, it's going to be a long day. Some good things are going to happen. Some not so good things are going to happen. And you might feel like you need to scream and cry. You might feel like you need to celebrate. Any of those feelings are okay. And mom's going to join you. And then we can go to the park. And then you do that. And you really join them in either that commiseration, in that celebration, whatever it needs to be for your child, join them in that feeling. If they need to throw up their hands and shout and kind of dance around because it was a fantastic day and they're feeling good, join them in that feeling. If they need to flop on the couch and cry and scream and stomp their feet, join them in that, because then they're not alone in it. And it will likely be a lot less than it would be if they were alone in it. And then go do something fun together. Okay, so we've regulated ourselves, regulated our kids. We've related to them, let them know that, hey, I see that feeling. I've felt that way before, and we're a team and we're going to get past this together. And then we're going to move on to teaching and planning. So while we aren't going to try to change the behavior initially or the feeling at all, what we are going to do is teach them to change the behavior and get their need met in an appropriate way that's more helpful for them. So we're not going to do this immediately, because if you try to do this immediately, they're just going to dysregulate again. You're going to wait until your kiddo has really calmed and you've done something fun together and kiddo's connected. And then you're just going to wonder together about what happened. You might say something like, you know how earlier today you got in the car and you were so upset? I wonder what happened there. And just wonder. So no guilt, no shame, just wonder together about what happened and listen to their perspective of things. Often they'll have experienced things that we wouldn't have even noticed. And maybe their teacher and peers didn't even notice. So we want to listen to their perspective and think about what contributed to that. And you can kind of discover together where support could have been provided along the way. Like maybe you hear that they didn't have anybody to sit with at lunch. And so you can think about, what could you do if that were to happen again? Or even better, if that had happened to your best friend, what would you want them to do? So if you can kind of externalize it a little bit, like if it had happened to someone else, what do you think that person could do? Because that will help them to really be able to think through it without getting stuck in how horrible that felt to them at the time. So we want to use this as an opportunity to expand their network of support, let them know who they could go to, identify maybe some safe people in the school. Who do they really feel comfortable? Maybe it's the counselor, maybe it's the principal or vice principal, maybe it's the lunch lady, maybe it's their teacher, maybe it's the PE teacher or music teacher. You never know. So kind of touch base with them and figure out who's safe. Who do they know? What other kids could they go to that are usually safe for them? And help them to realize that there are signs that they're starting to get upset. Help them to notice where they feel feelings in their body and seek support when they start to notice those feelings. So there's another great tip sheet on the website called Emotion Coaching, and that'll kind of coach you through that process of how to do that. You could also talk with a therapist about that if you'd like some more information. It takes a lot of practice, and it takes appropriate responses from caregivers over and over and over again. Think about it as we don't learn things the very first time. We need to see it done. We need to watch it done again. We need to practice it ourselves and have it not work so well and then tweak it a little bit. And so just like how adults learn things, kids learn things. And if you can learn through play, that happens much, much faster. So if you can even role play with your kids, maybe you pretend to be them and they can be somebody that they had a conflict with. And so make it fun and make it silly, but help them to know that you're going to work through it with them. And again, this is going to happen over and over again, that we're regulating ourselves, regulating our child, relating to them, and then teaching them some skills that they need to have to manage those big feelings. So the people in the on-site workshop got to work together to develop an individualized plan. But we have available, and we'll make it available however you get this video, where we will email you or have a link where you can get our Managing Restraint Collapse worksheet. And I would really encourage you to take some time and think through how you can specifically do this, and then have that plan available to you, maybe in your glove box or maybe in your purse, however you need to do it, but remind yourself of what your plan is. So I want people to think about 2 to 3 things that they could do to regulate themselves before they interact with their child. So for me, an example would be, I'm going to listen to my favorite music. I'm going to sing out loud because that's going to calm my nervous system. And I'm going to make sure I have at least 3 glasses of water in the day before I go pick them up. And then I'm going to have a healthy snack as well. So I'm going to make sure that I'm not feeling hangry. And then when I pick up my kiddo, I'm going to put on their favorite music on low so that they can just barely hear it, so it's not overwhelming. Right before they get in the car, I'm going to have a water bottle and a crunchy snack available within their reach. I'm probably not going to verbally offer it, but I'm just going to have it available to them. And then I might put a deflated exercise ball at their feet and have their favorite fidget toy or a weighted lap pad or something available in the seat as well. So they get to choose what they think would be helpful. And then when I get to relating, a common thing that I hear from families is that their teachers are using a color chart system and kiddo was super upset about it. Maybe they didn't feel it was fair. So I'm going to look at maybe saying something to my kiddo like, your teacher used a color chart system today and your group was on yellow almost all day, if that's what they've told me. So I'm going to repeat to them what they've said so that they know I've heard them. Because that's a huge piece of relating. We want to feel like we were listened to. So I'm not going to say at that point, like, oh, I don't think a color system is a good idea. I'm not going to say, well, your group was probably on yellow because you guys weren't listening. I'm not going to argue with them at this point. I'm just repeating to them what they said. And then I'm going to acknowledge the feeling. Wow, that could feel really frustrating. You tried your best and it felt like it didn't matter at all. Oh, goodness. I would really feel upset about that too. So I'm acknowledging the feeling. And then I'm going to say something like, sometimes when I feel really frustrated, it helps me to have some water and a crunchy snack. I might like to stomp my feet a little bit too when I feel upset. So you're just planting the seed of these things are helpful for me, and you've already set that up so they have those things available to them. And just leave it at that. And then they get to choose what would be helpful, what would feel good to them at this point. And then later on, after they're regulated, after maybe they've had a nap, or maybe they've been able to go to the park or soccer practice and gotten that energy out, after they're regulated and we're in a good place together, I can start to develop a plan with them. And I'm going to say something like, I thought about how upset you were earlier. And I'm wondering how we could help your teacher understand how hard that was for you. He has a really hard job. You want to start building empathy for other people here. So kind of acknowledge what other people have going on during the teaching and planning phase. He really needs the class to listen and do their work. Let's think together about some ways that we can let him know when you're feeling frustrated and upset, and let everybody else keep on task. So we're not going to encourage them, to kind of like be wild in the room and make their feelings really known there. We're going to figure out together, how can we let the teacher know, like, hey, this is something that didn't really work for me, in an appropriate and respectful way. We're going to brainstorm some ideas. We're not going to limit their ideas. They can kind of come up with whatever they want to come up with, and we can throw some in there too. And then we're going to help them pick 2 to 3 ideas to try, and then figure out how we're going to do that. Who's going to be involved? Do they want you to talk to their teacher with them? Do they want to talk to their teacher by themselves? How do they want to handle it? It's really important at this step that parents avoid taking control of the plan. It's really tempting, I get that, but it's very, very important that kids have the upper hand in figuring out the plan that they are going to implement. So you're their support person, but they are going to be the one to implement the plan. So if you have additional questions on this, please feel free to email me or reach out in some way. I'm happy to talk this through. Just to recap what we have done today, we've talked about how common restraint collapse is. I really feel very strongly that normalizing it helps both kids and adults respond in more helpful ways. We want to remember food and water. We want to help them release pent-up energy. We want to provide sensory supports. It's often really helpful to use music for both adults and for kids, but the focus has to be on regulating the body and the mind, the adult and then the child, relating to the feeling, and then teaching them to recognize the signs and ask for support. We want to thank you for spending a few minutes with us today. Please know that Encompass is here to support you and your kids. We are here to help make Snoqualmie Valley a place where all kids can thrive. Our workshop next month will be holding space for kids that are hurting. And that training is really focused on helping parents get to a place where they can allow kids to have their feelings and support that. And I hope that you are able to join us next month. We will be offering both a virtual training as well as an in-person training, hopefully at this point at least, but it will be available in at least the virtual realm next month. If you wouldn't mind taking a second to click on the link that's provided to fill out our evaluation, we would really appreciate it. And we will also make available to you our tip sheet on restraint collapse. So all of those resources are available. Please know that we are happy you are here, and we wish you and your kids the best return to school possible.